All right, it's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Joe Stockman. I'm with FSI, and today I'm introducing some guest speakers to the FSI User Experience Series. This is the last session in our series, so thank you if you've attended some of the other sessions. But today we'll be introducing the inspection, testing, and maintenance and tweaking that system. So today we're going to have Matthias Ebinger do the discussion on increasing the value of the inspection, testing, and maintenance program, as well as George Oberlander, Robert Peffin, and John Zepp. These are all industry-wide experts in this field. And then there's me, Joe Stockman, the Director of Design here at FSI. So I am going to hand it over to Matthias. And if each person, well, when you get the floor, introduce yourself. I didn't do anybody huge justice here, but go ahead and move over. Just one quick note. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. If you do have questions for the group, go ahead and type your question in that Q&A area. And I'll try to monitor that and see if I can answer questions or try to interrupt Matthias or George or Robert or John if they're doing a talk. And then just a note for those guys, if you open up that Q&A panel, you'll be able to see the questions as well. But I'll hand it over now to Matthias. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe. Good afternoon. My name is Matthias Ebinger. I'm a Senior Director with Enstoa. Enstoa is a New York City-based consulting firm advising facility teams of large organizations and smaller ones with digital transformation in the facility space. We implement and integrate systems for construction management, space management, and asset management. And over the last few years have crossed paths with FSI again and again. And over time forged a partnership with FSI. We very much like working with FSI and are very proud today to announce a new initiative that we are working on with FSI. I want to introduce my colleagues here. We have some very deep expertise co-presenting together with me. Robert, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you, Matthias. So my name is Robert Peffin. I'm a consultant with Enstoa, and I have been consulting for over 20 years in the asset management, reliability, and maintenance space, helping clients, a broad array of clients, implement asset management, reliability, and maintenance best practices globally. And that has included supporting the implementation of new software systems such as CMS. So prior to that, I spent about 15 years in manufacturing, where I have worked on equipment of all types and descriptions, and a lot of that is directly related to the work we do in healthcare. And I'm excited about the opportunities that this is presenting.
Thank you, Robert. George? George, are you on mute? Okay, why don't we go to John Zepp?
I can speak for George too. Yeah, my name's John Zepp. I'm with CFS Engineering Facilities Management. I work for George. Our background is working in operations and in maintenance for many years in facilities, and we provide maintenance procedures. We provide various support in the facility management area.
Thank you, John. So what we want to do this afternoon is to cover a lot of ground. And we said we should because we will have quite a journey as we go through all the material, and we'll move very fast. We should give you an overview of what that journey will be for the next hour. And then we said, let's not build up any suspension here. Let's from the very beginning show where we want to end up with. We are going to introduce later the concept of having a structured maintenance program within FSI that would allow you to track your binders fully electronically. You can do that today, but it's a bit cumbersome, where you would have access to code libraries, to procedures that would then generate binders for you the way you get binders today in a quality to the way you get it today from your consultants and from your vendors. What we will do is first, talk about why it is so hard to get real full value out of the ITM program. We all know it, we all live it. I assume that most of you here on the phone, have been in this space for a while, doing maintenance, supporting maintenance with a CMMS package. And we know what it should be. It's really, really hard to get there. We have worked very hard as a team between FSI and STOA and CFS to talk about standardization, because without standards, this is a lost case from the beginning. And for some of you who were involved in the industry discussion, you'll see some of the slides that will look familiar, and we'll cover this quickly. There is a really exciting initiative with ASHI and with the FGI to standardize some of the data sets in facilities. And then at the end, we'll highlight what this means in terms of having a common platform and foundation for maintenance procedures. So what is the problem? I'm not going to tell you anything new. Most of us on the phone, I would believe maybe 80% would say our CMMS system is just really, really hard to stay on top of it. Some of you have very good maintenance programs, very mature, invest a lot of effort to get them to where they need to be. But generally, this is a field that we all struggle with. It's very hard. One of the reasons it's very hard after a construction project is complete to get your maintenance program updated, to get the assets into the system, to get it updated. It is very hard also because you have different players in the organization entering the data, and so it's not always as consistent as it should be. We always have to have our compliance documentation right, and that is something we don't compromise on in healthcare. And so a lot of time and a lot of our resources are invested in getting the paperwork and increasingly PDFs right. But that process takes a lot of time, and that time ideally would be spent setting up an ITM program, inspection, testing, maintenance program. And we would rather than having time spent on those binders, like to make sure our ITM program is clean, because then the binders are easier. However, the reality of life is the binders have to be good, and if our data is not good, we have to just do whatever it takes to get those binders in good shape. I think that resonates probably many of you here on the phone, and we've all lived it. And as a consequence, we don't really know if our inspection, testing, and maintenance program is effective. By the way, I'm using the term ITM here because the Joint Commission has started using it as well. ITM is another way of addressing the PM program. Preventive maintenance is really a subset of ITM. We do inspections, we do tests, and we maintain our assets. And so the idea with the term ITM is that we are saying, instead of calling it a PM program, we are calling it an inspection, testing, maintenance program. So we want to know that our ITM program is effective, because if we knew this, then we could answer, do we have the right resources? Do we have enough staffing levels, skill levels? Do we have the right maintenance approach to begin with? And are we asking for capital for the right pieces of equipment, right? Now, where we want to end up at the end of this presentation is an understanding of an effort to generate standardized nomenclature and terminology for assets in healthcare. So let's define what assets are called, because once we define what assets are called, and to begin with how we break, you see this picture here of a machine room, how we break this into assets, then we can agree on where barcodes should go or QR codes should go. We can then agree with our engineers and our contractors and our commissioning agents who is responsible at the end of a construction project to put those stickers on, and give them a book where you as engineers say, this is what we want, and for once put to rest the discussion where it's always unclear who really is responsible to barcode the equipment and to make sure the equipment ends up in your maintenance management package. We want to make sure that our procedures are fully connected to code requirements, so that if code changes, we know what we need to change in our maintenance program, and we don't have to sift through tens or sometimes even hundreds of PM procedures and schedules to update it to the code changes. And then I think where we want to go with this presentation, and I think this will resonate with you as well, it's important to have a clean inspection, testing, maintenance program to do your analysis. If you have a structured way of how your PMs are run, you can start using CMS analytics, which is something we're going to show you very briefly later, how CMS analytics can help you to dig into your PM program, into your ITM program, and see where you have outliers. And then the second part is making sure that your ITM program is really well organized so that you can align it with codes and with the elements of performance from your accrediting agency. And then ideally, we all want to go there. Very hard to actually go there is to support reliability-centered maintenance. And then, obviously, once we have a structured ITM program that is reliable data, then we can talk about staffing levels. We can justify the resources we have. We can do workload balancing. We can make sure that the work that needs to be done is done at the right skill level, right? And we don't have to have personnel that's either not trained or personnel that's too qualified doing work that's not appropriate for them. And we can really fine-tune our maintenance strategy, and we'll talk about this later a bit, moving towards more predictive and quantitative maintenance. And then the last piece that we are very excited about is to start thinking of benchmarking. How do we compare at the operational level with our peers?
Yeah. Matthias, can you confirm my microphone is working?
We can hear you now, George, yes.
I apologize. For those of you who know me, I have a hearing problem, so I struggle with this technology, but I apologize. George Oberlander Jr., Director, Chief Engineer of TFS Facilities Management. For those that know me and those that don't, I have been involved with data standardization since the beginning of my career in 1985, starting with the state of New Jersey, then the Army Corps of Engineers, the Port Authority, New York Presbyterian, and finally working with the great team that Matthias has put together to really bring this thing home to become what I call a standard. And what I'm excited about is that for those of you who run hospitals, and I have done that for 13 months in New York Presbyterian, this takes the burden off of worrying about what codes and regulations you have to follow, plus having to look up those codes regulations. This standard puts that all on your fingertips. And I think that when you go through this presentation, you're going to say to yourself, wow, I no longer have to worry about that aspect of my business now. I can focus on using the data to manage the hospital rather than reacting to it.
Yep, George, thank you for that input. You've been around for a long time. I think a lot of people know you, and it's really good to hear this, from people with deep experience. I think I go to the list of participants here. Many people on this phone call can relate to this, and it's exciting to see a lot of movement in that field right now. So let me dive into this one right away. Industry standardization. For those of you who have not been involved, reach out to FSI, reach out to me. You should get involved. We have made a lot of progress. In fact, we are publishing a first version of these standards. Actually, the first part came out last week. By the end of this week, we should have the remainder come out. What we are standardizing is a classification schema of what we call assets. Now, it's very well understood what our assets are. It's very well understood what we call it, but everybody does it slightly different. And so every time, we as consultants work with an organization, or organizations do it on their own, they spend time and effort to say, what should an asset category look like? What should we call an asset? What should be our naming standard? And in healthcare, 80, 90, 95% of our equipment that we maintain in our facilities is the same across every single hospital in the country. It is not something that we should have to reinvent every single time. What happened was that we at the user conference, FSI user conference 2 years ago, we made a call for participations. We had some very good response, and then later at the ASHI conference last summer, made another call. Lots and lots of good feedback, lots of people getting involved, leading eventually to work directly with ASHI and work directly with the FGI. And the outcome of this first phase of our standard process is a publication of naming conventions for assets based on uniformat and naming conventions for spaces. So just very quickly going back here, you have your building systems. Let's say you have a domestic water system. The system itself is domestic cold water, and then you have hot water branches coming off. And then the assets are those points that you are interested from a maintenance perspective, right? So when you set up your asset inventory, you put barcodes or QR codes on these individual assets. It's important to be very clear on what this is. And that standard is available. It'll be available for download next week on the ASHI website, and you can download it. And then we have the same thing. This was work with the Facility Guidelines Institute, the same thing for how you classify buildings, and then areas within your buildings, and then the rooms within it. If you go to the ASHI FM Healthcare Facilities magazine, there is an article this week. I am the lead author, but this is an article that was a product of many people working together. So if you go online, or we'll get the printed edition of the magazine. It should come. It should arrive anytime now. Find the article, read about it. It highlights how Yale New Haven Health, as an FSI client, was leading here. I know we have a couple of Yale New Haven Health people on the phone here. You guys were some of the trailblazers here, setting up a categorization schema that's aligned with an industry standard. It's uniformat from the Construction Specification Institute, and now you have a standardization schema that, if we as an industry, update our asset inventories, that we can align with, and where we now agree what assets are called. Our working group came up also with drawings. So you have now sketches that show you one-line diagrams, typically, typical diagrams of how our systems are set up, met gas systems, central cooling, central heating systems, electrical distribution systems. And then we are on those drawings, and John Zepp was leading, putting those drawings together. On those drawings, you can see, if you're not clear what an asset category is, you can see actually, how that asset fits into the bigger context. So lots and lots of good stuff. Certainly something that I would recommend for you to take a look. Go to the ASHI website and download that material for your use. I wanted to just give you two examples of how these standardized approaches can help. So here, this diagram shows a floor plate, right? We have two use cases. 3/4 of the floor has a surgical patient care unit, and then 1/4 of the floor has an administrative area. This is where we classify the criticality of how important that space is, relative to life safety, infection control, and business continuity. So you establish criticality scores on the space side, and then you see at the lower part, for the example of air distribution systems, you have your air handlers, and now you can say, my air handler, serves an area that has high criticality, or medium low criticality, and you can establish then for that air handler what the risk is, right? Risk is likelihood of failure, which is a function of your system, and then the impact of that failure, which is a function of the space. And we all know that it's just really hard to do if your data is all over the place. The beauty with those industry standards is you have standardized way of establishing, criticality areas, patient criticality, and then you can establish, scores for the condition of your systems, for the redundancy and resiliency. And, with that, you can do really good, solid risk management. We could spend all day talking about this. Let me move on to another example. This is CMS Analytics, the analysis package that increasingly hospitals are turning on within CMS. What this does is it gives you insights into your ITM program, and I just wanted to show you a few examples. So what you see here is a screenshot from the CMS Analytics tool. We are seeing the ITM, Inspection Testing Maintenance Reliability Dashboard, and what you see here is very effective. You see per asset category what kind of procedures you are running, right? So you see for your sanitary drainage, you have all of these procedures running. Risk has not been assigned, right? So these are all TBDs. And then on the right side, you see the frequency of how often those ones come out. Now, if you look at this for your fire pump or for your doors, you can very quickly see where you have an incorrect procedure setup, or where your procedure is running at a frequency to low, or more critical to high. If you do too much inspections, it just eats up resources. It may not add value. You can very quickly with that tool assess where you have inefficiencies. Then, in this case, we have 5 assets that don't have a schedule. You can hover over it and you actually see exactly what those assets are. Are these assets an issue, not having an active PM running on it, an active ITM, or is that okay? Right. So that's the one example where CMS Analytics gives you the ability to very, very quickly and effectively drill into your inspection, testing, maintenance program and to see where you are. The more standardized you are, we all agree, the easier this analysis will be, because it'll all be clean and straightforward, and then you can see the outliers and fix them. Second part that I wanted to show you, just as an example for where standardization can really help you make your ITM program really do work for you, is when you look at the history of your ITM, of your inspection, testing, and maintenance. So what assets are failing? And then you can ask yourselves, do we have the right frequencies? For example, NFPA requires you to inspect your doors, your fire doors, smoke doors annually, but we often inspect them more frequently because we just don't want to be in a place where the door breaks the month after we've inspected it, and then for 11 months that door is broken. Right? So what we do when we don't really have a choice, we just inspect many of our doors more frequently. With a tool like this, over time, you can build a history to see where your frequent issues are, and then you can custom tailor your inspection, testing, maintenance to occur where the risk is, and you don't have to blanket cover everything, but you apply your coverage to areas that are high risk. So let me give you an example. One thing that we have to keep an eye on, as you all know, is schedule compliance. Right, the Joint Commission requires us to be at 100% schedule compliance. We get to 100% by pencil whipping. This tool here in CMS Analytics shows you where you really are. And the beauty is you can now see by asset category. These are the ASHI asset categories, very clean. Let's say we want to look at the roofs. Roofs are not regulatory, right? We want to see how we are doing with our inspections here. And we see that our roof inspections are not at 100%, but maybe with the roof we are okay, not always being 100% on schedule with doing our inspections because it's not regulatory, and as long as we catch up, we are fine. Now, when you go to your fire doors, you want to be at 100%. And what you see here is you see the timeline. We are just hovering over the doors. You see the timeline, and you see that sometime in the summer, we missed a month. Maybe a team was on vacation or supervisor was on vacation, and we had a whole month where we were not on time. But otherwise, we are generally on time. And then there was something at the beginning of the year, maybe this was the year-end Christmas holiday where we missed our time window again. What this tool does is it allows you to pinpoint exactly where you are not on schedule, and you can very easily with your team decide, maybe you can't do everything all the time, but at least the critical stuff you want to do and you want to stay on top of it. Then the next thing, we are talking about doors, right? This is schedule compliance. Are we inspecting the doors at the time when we have to? And that's a Joint Commission requirement. But then really almost more important for us, yes, schedule compliance important, we have to do it, we know, but really important for us, if we find deficiencies, what do we do here? So here is now a different view where we drill down and we go away from the schedule and we look at what we actually found when we inspected. So here are our doors. We did 5,000 inspections. Right? You can hover over it. You see when those inspections happened across the year. Right? You see we do a lot of inspections. And then you saw towards the end of the year, we actually are finding that we had many more failures, those red dots. Right? So something has changed. And the nice part is you can, with one click, drill down. Here are your inspection records. And now you see everything that you checked on your fire doors, and you see here a list of everything that failed. You could export this into Excel, and you could send that Excel over to your vendors and say, like fire door inspections produce these issues. You filter out the lock specific ones, send them to a locksmith, and then take the other one, send them to a specialist, and have them wholesale fix all of your doors. All the data is right here. So that's the existing, this is where we are already today with CMS. That analysis tool exists, it's in place, it works well. But we want to go one step further. We want to make sure that we can actually produce clean binder reports directly in CMS. But to do that, we have to standardize how we do our procedures. And with that, I want to hand over to John. I mean, John, you have been in this space for many, many years. We all know, the Dilbert joke is very good. We've all tried a plan to improve our ITM program. I think many can speak, can agree with this. We've tried to make it better. It's really, really hard. And at the end of the day, we end up with a problematic situation with the ITM program just being very, very unwieldy and hard to contain. So John, you have put a lot of thoughts into this. Walk us through your thoughts here.
Yes, certainly. There's just go to the next slide. There's a certainly advantages to having a good, robust CMS program to be used as a primary source for achieving compliance, for instance. But to get there, there's certain things that have to be standardized within that program. One, we need to look at our code requirements and have a good library of codes, whether it's NFPA, CMS, citations from Joint Commission, and so forth, so we need a good library of information there. Also, we have a lot of assets, but unless the assets are grouped or categorized properly, we're not going to be able to effectively apply our code requirements to them. So what we want to do is have a uniform means to relate the assets and the codes. One of the couple of things we have to take in consideration here is that there's a few challenges. Obviously, facilities differ in size and in composition and function. It depends whether you're looking at a facility level as an individual hospital, or if it's going to be a corporate initiative where you may have 15 or 20 properties that had to be considered. Also, we drill down a little bit and you can see where when you actually get into the work, whether your procedures are going to be done in-house or by vendors. And for example, if you were to do something in-house, how's that being handled? Are you doing rounding? Are you doing logs? Are you doing standard work orders? Obviously a combination of those. So those types of things have to be taken into consideration when we look to standardize at a facility in the CMS program. And then when we look at our codes and our standardized asset descriptions, we can bring those together to create maintenance procedures, ITM procedures. And again, we look to standardize the way the presentation is so that they all come out the same appearance to mechanics across, whether it's a building, a site, a zone, or multiple facilities within a corporate entity. So structure is important, and we can start to get there when we have our assets well organized. Now, to help us organize, it's convenient to break down into packages the various types of procedures. So if we can say, and we can break that into two sides, we can look at the regulatory side and say, for example, doors, stairwells, egress, means of egress, and so forth. That forms a convenient package, and that helps us to focus in on compliance, whether it's reporting or adding new equipment into the system. So we've established these regulatory packages, and what's important here, what we stress, is standardization on this side. The more we can standardize here, then specifically, especially for corporate clients who have a number of facilities, they'll know that, say, a recall, elevator recall, is being done at all the facilities and all the elevators on a monthly basis, following the same procedure and meeting the same code requirement. And then, of course, there's the non-regulatory packages where, and of course, it blends across a little bit here, but we have a little more leeway in the non-regulatory, where we may have various types, different equipment manufacturers and so forth, or different needs within a particular facility. And again, we have the opportunity to do some predictive maintenance with the reliability centered maintenance methods, specifically in the MEP areas. And now we can take and also I might mention that lets us do more of the local customizing. So in the non-regulatory area, we often can do a little more customizing for local needs. So then if we look a little further, we can go on, and we mentioned that we have established a library of codes and regulations. For example, you may go have a Medicare and Medicaid concerns there. So within that, there's obviously a lot of specific requirements in there. And then again, we say have something in NFPA where just in say sprinkler alone, you may have 15, 20, 25 things. Once you have a library of these codes, and once you've standardized your categorization of your assets, these can be easily applied to all your assets. If we move on to look at it a little more granularly, you can see that we've related the codes to the assets, and we can create some procedures. And we have a format where we can pick any particular asset, fire hose connection or so forth. And we know that we're going to have a quarterly inspection. It's going to be regulatory, and it's going to meet those following compliance requirements. So then we move on. It's a little hard to see, but there's a certain backshot process which goes on also on the front end with the program. It's really critical that it work efficiently, easily. You can get the information you need on a real-time basis, but to get there, there's a lot of back office work. And what we do is we set up a process where we have good version control, where we have the procedure library, where we know what the individual clients are using, so we can update when there's new regulations coming out. And also, again, we're in a position to tailor procedures based on your needs, whether it's something being done by a vendor or in-house, even though it might be the same thing. A procedure can come out that matches that particular requirement. So then to take a look at a little closer level, I'll turn it over to Robert, who can actually talk to a certain extent on the various levels that the maintenance can be drilled down into.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. So as both Matthias and John alluded, Instoa has developed, working with our clients and standardizing on their data, a set of standard maintenance PMs for all of the assets that are applicable to an healthcare facility. And again, almost all of the equipment is fairly standard in nature, and the preventive maintenance, the ITM maintenance that you need to do on the equipment is fairly standard. So we have a basic set of procedures that were written that meet all of the applicable codes and standards for the industry. But the real challenge to us becomes is how do we get greater value out of the ITM procedures we're executing in the field? How can we begin to drive performance improvement in our maintenance program to optimize its performance, get greater asset life out of our equipment, reduce our capital cost, and continue to ensure our compliance? And if we look at this, one of the most fundamental things we can do to create a data-driven maintenance program is to transition our existing PMs from qualitative PMs to quantitative PMs. And so this is what our level 2 procedures will effectively do. When we send at the level 1, and this is a basic example for a fan inspection. It's a belt-driven fan with belts and sheaves and a motor and a fan. But typically we will send a craftsman out to inspect the equipment, clean it, and then assess its condition. And one of the fundamental things we say is check check the belts, replace the belts if they're worn, inspect the shiv, replace the shiv if it's worn. But without some guidance or measure, you're left up to the background skills and knowledge of the individual craft person that's doing the work to check a belt for tightness. You're depending on him to use his thumb, unless you provide greater instruction and some basic measurement tools to do that. So one way we can move this to a more quantitative exercise is to use measurement tools to check the work we're doing. So when we say inspect shivs for wear, they actually make a wear gauge for shivs that's similar to the wear gauge you use on the treads for your tires on your car, but it gives you a quantitative assessment on how much your shivs are wearing, and you can record that, and then over time develop an idea of when you may need to effectively change the shivs. The belts are the same. You can measure the belt tension with a tensiometer and adjust the belts on a drive to the proper tension. It also provides, when you collect the data, it gives you guidance on where you've got recurring maintenance problems and how to assess the health of your equipment. If you're always executing a PM and having to adjust or replace the belts, it's a sure indication that you've got a problem with that piece of equipment, and then you can react accordingly. And using the data, it can help guide you to do one, root cause analysis on recurring problems so that you can identify what's truly causing the issue, what's failing, what you may need to change, modify, or replace. The other thing is that you can use this data to assess where you should be performing reliability-centered maintenance or failure mode effect analysis on your equipment to develop more effective maintenance plans and procedures to meet your specific needs within your organization. But the key here is to move away from qualitative PMs to quantitative PMs, record that data, which comes out of the CMS system and feeds into all the key performance measures that Matthias outlined earlier, and then use that to make data-based decisions on where to drive performance improvements in the organization. Okay, Matthias, I think it's back to you.
Thank you, Robert. So the big question that we want to highlight and answer here at this point is, how does it all work? And we've obviously already addressed the basic structure here. I want to go back to one slide here. I think the important part is we can standardize across many customers with FSI the inspection, testing, maintenance program. It is driven by regulation. There's really no need for everybody to write this from scratch. And once we write it, we can set it up in a way that we can generate really good compliance reports. And as we all know, as we are getting our reports from our vendors, they are really, really good. And the reason why they are good is because they capture those 2 or 3 fields that you really need for a good report to go into your compliance binder. But we don't capture that data in our CMMS package. And so usually, just a little bit like fire extinguisher type, right? That you might want to know, or when you do your damper inspections, a few attributes. And what we will do with these standardized packages is to set up these data sets and help you with reports already then available for you to make sure, if you want to do it in-house, to collect these data points so that you can then very effectively run these reports in-house, or if you do it with a vendor, that you can attach the vendor report to your work order, and then that report automatically makes it into the binder. So that's the one thing. And then on the other hand, as Robert pointed out, for non-regulatory work, we have best practices, procedures in place. Now, this is something that you may or may not want to do, because all of us have figured out how we run our shops. You might, many of us might be perfectly happy with the program we have. On that end, it's really a question on, do you want to upskill your team use more effective programs and get your procedure set up in a way that you really start building a data set over time that tells you where your equipment needs investment or where your equipment should be maintained differently. And so how does it all work in behind the scenes then? I think the important part here is it's important to have this foundation available globally. So as we discussed earlier, there is now available a standardized set of space types. If you do space management in CMS, you have access to that. There is also a standardized set of these asset categories that's published with ASHI. And the new piece is that there is now also a standardized set of ITM procedures that are aligned with a national code compendium. The next part, once you have those pieces in place, is the generation of what we call full service electronic binder reports. You have today good reports coming out of CMS, but we want to go a step further and give you reports that have the same quality as those reports that you are getting from your vendors. Again, you can still run your program through a vendor, but at the end of the day, these reports will allow you to say, what did I do for a specific EP? And you see that at that particular frequency, you had either a vendor meet whatever the code requires you to do, or you had your in-house team do that, and the system will allow you to do that. And then the last part there is, and that's another very exciting outcome of this. Once we have alignment across our institutions, we can then do true benchmarking and across industry, across healthcare systems to see how long should it take to do an ice machine, how long should it take to do 50 exit signs, and build a library that one single institution could not build, but as a group of users, and with CMS as the platform being very consistent in how it is used. This is an opportunity for teams that have an interest to opt in and to be part of this benchmarking study. And then once you have those benchmarks, and once we agree on what good maintenance procedures look like on the regulatory side, you can then support capital planning. And we could even take it a step further and say, build a case to go back to NFPA and say, inspecting our exit signs once a month or our fire extinguishers once a month might be no longer needed. Look at the 2, 3, 4 years worth of data from a large group of healthcare systems, and then you can really build a force with having data to support it. And then more importantly, what we want to make available is what we have dubbed with a code name, a compliance corner, where you have a very simple way to look at where you are. Here you see, for those of you who are Joint Commission accredited, very basic dashboard. It looks basic, but it has a lot of functionality behind it. So the idea being that you see your codes, you can then right from here, you can go into a PDF binder that looks exactly what you typically have on paper. You have a cover sheet, a dashboard, and then from there you have all of the documentation that you need attached. If your vendors have submitted reports, they get included in that binder, and the binder would be available for you right here within CMS. You then see how many work orders you have open, right? You see how many of those work orders are late, and if you have a follow-up corrective work that needs to be happening, you have that too. And then the last piece that is also really cool that can be done, and that's already existing in CMS Analytics. You can then drill into the areas where you have chronic problems, and then find out what it is. Is it that are we understaffed? Do we have issues with our equipment being too old? Do we need to invest? Or whatever it might be, the analysis is then very focused. But Joint Commission is just one way of looking at it. Obviously, you can apply that same principle to other accrediting agencies, DNV and others. But then, very important, you can do the same thing for NFPA. So go through your reporting and run them by NFPA 25 sprinkler systems, NFPA 70, NFPA 101, wherever you have references in your requirements. Where your regulators require you to do work, you can query how you are meeting those codes. CTAX, we mentioned already, water safety, ASHRI 188. right? We have ASHRAE 170 included as part of our elements of performance, but that is something we have actually, we have a program template available. And then other codes, there are many small codes, and very interesting for those of us, and I guess that's everybody who don't just follow national codes. There is then a section where all of us will have specific needs, by our municipality or by our states, where you can then have that exact same approach also applied to your local code requirements and attach that to your procedures as well. So, your exit sign inspections are both meeting NFPA and Joint Commission requirements, but they also meet requirements of your local fire marshal. That's where we will end up with this exercise. So you've seen in our presentation, we already have analytics up and running. If you haven't seen a demo yet, reach out to Glenn Fulgham from FSI and get a demo on this. We have our maintenance procedures ready. They are good to go. What we are doing next is to work with FSI to make what you see here on the screen a reality. And with that, I want to hand over to Joe Stockman, because he's the guy who makes things happen on the FSI side. Joe, if you want to talk about what your thoughts are on this.
All right, thanks, Matthias. And I know a guy, so that's how I make things happen. But here's where we are today. Right now, we are, everyone lives in their own bubble. You may or may not have a shared segment which has all your organizational standards that you defined, you developed over the years. They may have been passed down from software system to software system, and they run your facilities. Each facility, you might have one or more facilities where you're using all that data to perform your work orders, to get compliant, to do your fire extinguisher inspections. And then within CMS, we have our dashboard, which show you open work orders, reporting that shows you your PM% complete reports. And then we recently added our analytics package into the system, where again, that's an analytics package within your own bubble. So as Matthias pointed out, that there you can really drill down into your own data and see how you're doing within your group. So what we're looking at doing is sort of building a common foundation. That's what Matthias was talking about. And this common foundation would be something that we build, we maintain. We have this global segment in place, and we define the standardized asset categories, which they're already defined. The standardized FGI location categories, which are defined. The code references, and the newest part, the ITM procedures, your inspection, testing, and maintenance procedures that are going to live in there. And then you'll be able to access those and use those within your client environment. And what you gain from that is you're able to get an addition to the analytics package, where one, not only can you analyze yourself against yourself or other facilities, you can you could take a look at yourself against other institutions as well. And then from there too, if we have global compliance binders where we can create these PDFs, create these for you from this common foundation. As the codes change, we would maintain those items as well. All those things would come into play as a standardized compliance binder. And as it was said earlier, you could focus on running your facility versus running, figuring all this out and implementing all these things at your organization. FSI and SOA sort of take the lead on that. And then from there, you get the benchmarking, and that's where you go against other facilities. So if it's like, if your staff is taking, you're wondering why it takes your staff a long time to do these types of inspections, you can compare yourselves against other hospitals and say, hey, you know what? We're actually doing better than some of these other hospitals are at our inspections. So it's a way to sort of compare yourself across the industry. So that's where FSI and SOA are working together. And if you recall, Matthias pointed out our previous user conferences, the way CMS Analytics got built is, I think it was last year's user conference, we had a group put together where we went through and we took input from that group and we built that analytics package based on input from the users. And we're looking to do the same thing here. We're looking to get input from you. What are you currently printing and putting in your binders? We have a general idea, but let's take a look at somebody that may be putting something, local jurisdiction type items, what are important to those areas? How can we build, state dashboards, and how can we build local dashboards? Some things that we're looking at. We're starting it obviously at the national level. Everyone's sort of in the same boat at the national level, but how do we continue to build these things? So the more we know about how our customers are working, the better we can get at building these compliance binders and making sure we have all the information in those. So if you are interested in those, I don't know if we have a slide for this, but I will say contact me, Joe Stockman, and I'll make sure I get the information out there to everybody on this call. And we're going to organize something. We have to sort of come up with a time frame of when we're going to meet these. We're looking at sort of kicking this off mid to late November to sort of just start getting input, have a few weekly or bi-weekly meetings to go through this in order to get all the specification we need to get this. The good news is we have a lot of these pieces in place already. So it's something we think we could add value to CMS and taking some of the workload off of you of building these things and putting these things into binders and all that type of information. So that's sort of where we're heading here. So we'll make sure we get that information out to you, but check your email for that stuff. It will be coming out. So. With that too, I noticed we do have a couple questions that had appeared. Matthias, I'm not sure if there's one or more slides. Maybe we'll get to the questions at the end. I think there's one or two more slides left. So.
No, actually, Joe, this is
that's the last one. Okay.
We can switch over to questions.
All right. So first question I have here is another module. Is this another module that we would buy, or can we do this with our existing CMS4? That's something we're still in the planning stages of figuring out. We're not sure if it's going to be an additional module. There will be some value added to it. So more than likely, yes, on that item. If we're going to be maintaining the compliance dashboards, the compliance, the code references, updating those, that's going to be one value you get. Another value you get, there would be the procedures, the ITM procedures, the standardized inspection, testing, and maintenance procedures for vendors. If you're using vendors to do some things, if you're using internal staff to do some things, we have procedures put together for each. So there would be some value added to your organization to use this. Another question or comment, let me see. Very excited for e-binders located right in CMS. I'm not sure how far along it's in development. As we say, we're going to get some input into here. One customer already has digital binders, and they've used them in the past, and it worked well. We did have two different views, one for us and one for surveyors, which would not show the red flags. That's kind of what our EP dashboard does now. It kind of does show you the red flags, and that is mainly designed for internal use, although you could show a Joint Commission surveyor this. These would be the Joint Commission ready compliance binders. These would be what you would actually show to those Joint Commission people as well. So thanks for the question and comments. We're hoping, our goal and FSI's goal from the beginning has been, stop printing out all these reports and putting them in real binders. Even if you put them in electronic binders so they're easily accessible during the code review or the documentation review step for an inspection. That's what we're looking to do. We're looking to save the trees, if you will. So, and I'll go ahead and pause. If there's any more questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A section. But I do want to thank Matthias and Robert and John and George for putting on this session and showing us all this information. And we do have another question here. Is the idea that FSI will maintain all code compliance requirements, CMS, Joint Commission, DNV, et cetera? I'll let Matthias answer that question.
The answer is yes. We have, and in fact, this is where where this idea was born. We have all of this already in place, and we've shown you in an earlier screenshot. There's a big database in place that tracks this data, and it is very hard and time consuming. And I've been on the inside, on the facility side, trying to stay on top of it. We see it now, being a consultant, we see it with our clients. It is a hard undertaking to stay on top of all of that. And so the idea with this approach is we team up, we join forces, and we provide for you, the alignment with code. If code changes, there will be a the anticipation right now is that there will be a call for those of you who want to be involved in structuring the procedures to meet those codes. You can get involved. Otherwise, you would have the ability, once those procedures are updated, to then upgrade yourselves to those new procedure versions to meet code. There would be a training program, and so this capability would allow you to stay on top of code changes and making sure that your binders would stay alive and would stay compliant with whatever is expected. Good question. Thank you.
All right.
Point, Joe, I just want to say one thing. I haven't been involved with this for so long. I grew up during the Apollo era, and I became an engineer because of the space program. And I'm sorry I'm saying this, but I'm going to say it. I always wondered how Scotty for the Enterprise would do it. He would not rebuild something that's already been built. So he would find ways to do things that are repetitive. And he would take the data from the designers, put it into operations. The operations people would take it to maintain the facility, maintain the enterprise, and then they would use the tool to schedule warp drive replacement. So the goal here is to start a journey. We believe by doing the data standard, you're beginning a journey to eventually get to where the startup enterprise is. And again, that was the thinking in my head when I was working with these guys. But I just thought that was a great analogy.
All right, thank you, George. Any other questions? If not, thanks everyone for attending all of our webinar series. We had, I think, 5 different webinars throughout the month of October. So thank you very much. And hopefully next year we get to do this in person again. It's a lot more fun seeing all those faces out there. So thanks again, and